It's my great pleasure now to introduce Christina Hansen, the Disaster Grants Program Counsel at LSC. She focuses on disaster grant administration, evaluates grantee performance, provides technical assistance to grantees engaged in disaster relief and recovery efforts. She works extensively with LSC grantees here in Florida and across the entire Southeast, particularly addressing the impacts of hurricanes. With over 20 years of experience as an attorney and in program management, policy, and leadership, Christina collaborates with LSC's grantees and external partners to strengthen the integration of civil legal aid into disaster response and recovery. We are very lucky to have her at LSC. Christina, please.
Thank you, John, and hello, everyone. As John mentioned, I'm Christina Hansen. I am a proud member of LSC's Disaster Grants team. Really quickly, for those of you who may not be aware, LSC has 3 disaster funding opportunities through which we award 5 different disaster grants. The disaster team, as John mentioned, oversees and administers those grants. We provide technical assistance to all LSC grantees that experience a disaster in their service area. We provide access and information to multiple audiences through ladrc.org or the Legal Aid Disaster Resource Center and heartlanddisasterhelp.org. And finally, we conduct outreach and education in the national disaster response community about disaster legal services. And I'm honored today to serve as an MC of this special section of today's forum. In a moment, you're going to hear 6 brief stories from 6 different perspectives about the role and impact of legal services in the wake of natural disasters in Florida. Our speakers are going to take you on a journey where we are in this moment in history with natural disasters increasing in frequency and severity, the devastating impact of disasters on Floridians, especially those with limited resources and where they turn for help, how partnerships and alliances, such as those between faith-based organizations and legal services providers, are critical to reaching people in need, how legal services are just one part of the broader disaster response framework, the benefits to a community when we invest in disaster legal services, and finally, a client's personal account of receiving disaster legal services and the impact it had on housing stability. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome our first speaker to the stage. Jason Susala works from the Ruskin Office of Bay Area Legal Services as part of the disaster relief team. He's going to kick us off by providing some context on the state of natural disasters in Florida. Jason.
There's a lot more people in the room. See, sitting in the front, you only see one person at a time. So when you get up here and you realize that there's all these people behind you, it's extremely nerve-wracking. So give me just a minute here as I go over my notes and refresh my memory on anything I was going to say. Right, okay, here we go. Jason ends his captivating speech, immediately followed by an eruption of loud applause. Standing ovation, roses are thrown at his feet, and he is presented a large golden trophy. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Here's the beginning part. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jason Susala, and I'm the managing attorney of Bay Area Legal Services Disaster Relief Team. I want to welcome you all to the Tampa Bay region. For those of you who aren't from here, things probably look kind of okay in our community. Let me suggest that is anything but the case. We've been severely impacted by a number of hurricanes during this past hurricane season. And Floridians are pretty good at hiding their hurricane scars. So I'm kind of here to tell you some bad news. If you haven't heard, we have been impacted by 3 consecutive hurricanes. That's 3, and I emphasize 3, and I'll keep saying it, because most of us are thinking of Milton and Helene. But prior to that, the nasty visitor in town before those 2 was Debbie. Debbie brought significant flooding to our coastal communities and a lot of devastation to our southern neighbors in Sarasota and Manatee counties. Let's see here. She was in August, right? Helene was in September, and Milton was in October. Those two last storms, 2 weeks apart. Two major hurricanes impacting our community in 2 weeks. It's a heinous situation. Right now, we have over 319,000 valid FEMA registrations for Hurricane Helene in the state of Florida. 52% of those total registrations are coming out of Hillsborough County and our neighbor Pinellas County to the west. 52% of the total state registrations for Helene. For Hurricane Milton, statewide, we are over 1 million valid FEMA registrations. 40% of those are coming out of Hillsborough and Pinellas. The damage is right here. It's a bad place to be, and we're going to be in it for a while. Because as we know, disasters do not end when the wind stops blowing. That's just the beginning. The difficulty comes after the event, when folks are struggling, trying to put their lives back together, trying to cope with the trauma of loss, and in a community of disarray, surrounded by devastation. So, you want some good news, I suppose. The good news is that more than ever, legal aid is a respected partner in the disaster relief community. Survivors know to come to us now. And this was not true years ago. This took years of building up our programs, connecting with the right partners. Just as an example, Bay Area's statewide disaster relief line was once a sleepy line. Let's go back to July. Maybe a handful of calls a day. There are some folks in the room who have direct experience with this, so they're probably mad or angry or thinking about how funny this is. This line has handled since July 3,000 pickups. And it's a testament to exactly how important we have become in this field and what the great amount of need is in our area. This makes our roles extremely important, more important than ever. But with this important role comes some challenges, right? Because some of us are not only advocates, we are also survivors. After Hurricane Milton, my entire neighborhood flooded. Inland flooding did not recede in my neighborhood for nearly a week. We were stuck in a powerless home for several days. Can't get out. Couldn't navigate the waterways that used to be roadways. The county eventually dispatched the sheriff to our neighborhood with a high water vehicle to ferry people in and out of our community so they could get needed supplies. This sort of impediment cannot stop the mission. What do? The communities we serve, the vulnerable communities we serve, are already vulnerable before a disaster. They are already suffering due to a variety of socioeconomic issues. And now, after a disaster, they are probably in the absolute worst of their entire lives. So, people are being kicked out of their homes illegally. People are losing their jobs because they lost their car in a hurricane and don't know how to navigate the system to get the funds to replace that car. Families are struggling with food loss. So what do? As a disaster advocate, you figure it out. That means sometimes you lose a little sleep after a disaster. It means sometimes you work weekends. And maybe in some circumstances, it means that you have to utilize your partially submerged 2002 Mercury Sable that is parked in your flooded driveway as your temporary office, using the cigarette lighter as a phone charger to attend multiple daily events and meetings to connect with local authorities, county officials, and disaster relief partners to do your part as a disaster advocate to connect the dots, to help resources flow, to make sure you're doing what you can to help the community. Because it's not about being in your office, not as a disaster advocate. We're different. Let me take a breath. Self-care can wait. And I know a lot of disaster partners don't like me saying that. They always say, take care of yourself first. No. Not us. No, we can't do that. Because it turns out we're very much needed right after the incident. Evictions move very quickly here in Florida. We can't sit back and take care of ourselves just yet. We have the luxury of taking care of ourselves later. We got to stick our necks out for these sorts of things. These vulnerable communities, they are extremely at high risk of being taken advantage of after a disaster, much more than other communities. And in many respects, we are the only ones who can help them. As attorneys working in disaster relief, we inhabit a very unique position. We can solve problems that others cannot. And many survivors are never going to recover without legal assistance or intervention. And they need us. Those communities really need us. I dare say the world needs us. Because disasters aren't getting better. We all see that. It's quite the opposite. But you can't help disasters, but you can help survivors. So I leave with one last thought here. Any attorneys in the room, non-legal aid attorneys, I make a plea with you. If you haven't already, consider reaching out to your local legal aid program that may be serving disaster survivors and offer a little bit of your time to help in a pro bono way some of these survivors. We need you, and they need you. Thank you. Can we put that dumb picture up real quick? Atypical roles, I'll tell you about this. That guy is in the Pinellas County Emergency Operations Center after Hurricane Helene. Milton, I couldn't because, like I said, I was flooded in my neighborhood. But they pulled me in there to staff a community liaison chair. You can't see it. My coworker here, John Wallace, is sitting next to me. The bad thing about that is that jacket that they gave to me, it's like 2 sizes too small. But the takeaway is that they let me take it home, and it sits on my coat rack. It's a lovely thing. You got to think outside your lane if you're practicing disaster relief. This is not about sitting in your office. This is about getting out there. This is about talking to community partners you wouldn't talk to otherwise. And this is really about doing whatever you can to support the disaster community. Thank you. That's for real, Leanne. How about that? I got 2 rounds of applause.
Thank you, Jason. I apologize. The gold statue was lost by my airline. I will give you the claim ticket and you can deal with them. But no, in all seriousness, I want to thank you for setting the foundation for our time together. Next, I'd like to welcome to the stage John Martino, who's the Director of Litigation for Community Legal Services in Mid-Florida, working out of the Daytona Beach office. John is going to paint a picture for us about how disasters impact low-income Floridians and how legal aid can help.
Imagine this. It's the end of your career. After decades of hard work and career changes and personal sacrifices, you're finally ready to slow down. For those of us lucky enough to reach that point, a new question emerges. Where am I going to spend my remaining years? Living independently in your own home, while often desired, can be difficult when physical limitations and a sense of loneliness start to creep into your life. So you search for a place that will offer you a sense of community, a place that has events that will keep you busy, a place where you can make new memories and spend the last chapters of your life. After looking at several senior living communities, you find a place that seems perfect. It's even affordable by Florida standards, right in the heart of Central Florida. You meet with a sales agent, you tour the campus, and really things look just as good as they sound. The golf course is lush and green. The shared spaces are welcoming and clean. And that events calendar has tons of ways for you to build connection with your neighbors. The agent shows you the apartment and says that there's even a creek just a short walk away. You're very charmed. Excited for this new chapter, you move in. You don't have much savings, but still you decide to buy some new furniture. You look forward to making new friends. You look forward to hosting gatherings. And for a while, things seem perfect. And then you hear about the oncoming storm. A hurricane is headed toward Florida. And at first, you think, no big deal, right? I've been through this before. But you remember talking to the sales agent about it. You asked about flooding, and he indicated it had been a problem in the past. There had been some minor flooding, but no big deal. It had been taken care of. It wouldn't happen again. So you think, that's fine, I'll stay. I'll weather it out. And then you start seeing your neighbors leave. And you think, that's interesting, but you know what, I got it. I can make it through. So the storm passes through the state, slowly, as we know they do. And as it finally gets to the community in Central Florida, you see wind and rain, and we know what it's like seeing that sideways rain kind of striking the community. You could almost not even see what's going on, not that many feet in front of your house. And so as the storm passes and you think, I'm almost in the clear, and it slows down, you notice that creek that was a selling point just a couple months earlier. And you notice that the level of that creek has risen. And then you notice that the water line is closer to your apartment than it was before. And then a short while later, just an hour later, you see that the water is 50 yards away. And you start panicking a little bit. An hour later, you see that it's 30 yards away. You start picking up your stuff that's low to the ground. You start putting it on the counter, on your bed. You start putting it in places where you don't think that the water would possibly get to it. And then the water starts coming in, slowly at first, just through the door. But then it starts coming faster. It starts coming through the walls. It starts even coming through the ground. 1 foot of water, you know the carpet's done. 2 feet of water, you know your appliances destroyed. 3 feet of water, and that realization finally hits, I need help. There you are, submerged in your apartment, 3 feet of water, watching everything you've worked for. Your life in this new community, your friends, all your possessions just float away from you. Eventually help arrives and you get saved by an airboat. Your friends, your belongings, you have no idea how they're doing. You survey the damage as you're boated out of your community and you see water as far as you can see. You know that your life in this new community is over, and with it, the memories you've just started to make. This story captures an experience very similar to many of the clients we represent at Community Legal Services. In 2022, a senior community in our service area was impacted by a devastating flood. The creek that ran along the northern end of the property overflowed and caused several feet of flooding across the property. That prior flooding that was referenced in that story, it was not minor. It was significant, and it was just 5 years earlier. A lot of the people didn't realize that they were being moved into apartments that had been previously flooded and rehabbed. It took weeks for the waters to recede for them to return to their apartments. When they finally returned to their apartments, what they found was devastation. They opened the door and were immediately hit with the smell of musty, stale odor. For weeks in a small, hot, and wet apartment, mold had formed over every single one of their possessions. Before the residents gained access, individuals were even hired to go through things, to toss things away that were destroyed. Some items were never found. For many, they had nothing left but the clothes on their back. Most lived out of a hotel for months, some even more than a year. There were several times that they had to be shuffled from one hotel to another. Some had nothing to purchase new possessions with other than the $700 that they got from FEMA for assistance. They were financially insecure, they had no permanent housing, and they were unsure of who to turn to. Most, of course, did not have flood insurance because they didn't know that they would need it. During this vulnerable time, these residents were asked to sign a document terminating their lease that also waived liability to protect the property owners. We filed 26 lawsuits on behalf of 33 clients. The causes of actions are negligence, misrepresentation, exploitation of vulnerable adults, and we have one federal fair housing claim. Some might wonder, why is a legal aid firm bringing torts lawsuits? But the truth is that's the only thing that fit the fact pattern. And many of our clients spoke with private attorneys, but no one was willing to take on these cases because it was not worth the time and expense for damages that were as low as these. But for these clients, it's about more than money. It's about months of living out of a hotel. It's about weeks waiting for that water to recede. And it's about that day that they returned to the apartments and saw the depth of their losses. Photographs of deceased relatives that they'll never see again. Their mother's wedding ring. Letters between their parents during World War II. Items that aren't things. They're literally their history. Imagine your history just floating away from you, like grains of sand in the water. Imagine if they had only been told that there was a flooding problem on the property. These cases are ongoing, so I don't talk about any one specific story or any specific defendants. But I bring up this problem that we have, this set of cases, because there are a couple of points that I think are important. And one of them is a core value of community legal services, adaptability. We need to be comfortable going outside the traditional legal aid practice areas. When I was promoted to leadership, I never thought I was going to be handling negligence lawsuits, and that's what I'm doing. The other thing is you have to be adaptable. You have to hire staff that fits the needs of the community. Unlike some of the other programs here, we didn't have a disaster unit to deal with these cases, so we built one from scratch. The other point is that for seniors, for other survivors of disasters, legal aid is the last line of defense. We are the only ones who will be there for them. We are their ticket to the courthouse. Without us, they don't get their day in court. What impact we ultimately make on these cases is yet to be realized. But what I can tell you is that every single day that I practice, their stories motivate me and my colleagues and my team. What we're doing would not be possible without organizations like Legal Services Corporation, Volunteer Florida, Funding Florida Legal Aid, Equal Justice Works, and our fellow legal aid partners, who not only offer advice because they have more experience than us when it comes to disaster work, but they offer logistical assistance as well, whether it's a justice bus or it's help on our helpline or whatever the case may be. Our legal aid partners have been instrumental to us dealing with the deluge of new clients. So going forward, just know that legal aid organizations like Community Legal Services are always going to be there to help survivors like the ones I just described, to not only help them pursue justice, but to achieve it. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for sharing that very vivid description and helping us better understand the real human impact of disasters here in Florida. Now I'd like to call the stage Greg Strader. Greg is the co-regional manager for the Southeastern United States for World Renew Disaster Response Services, a faith-based humanitarian organization. Greg also serves as the secretary of the National Voluntary Organizations Active in Disasters, yes, that's a long word, National VOAD, for those who are familiar with the acronym, Long-Term Recovery Committee, as well as on the Mentor Subcommittee. He's here today to talk about turning to our congregations and faith leaders when we need help with problems that often involve legal issues. Greg.
Thank you, Christine, and it's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. As Christine indicated, I am Greg Strader. I serve as the co-regional manager for World Renew for the Southeastern region, a very busy region between Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and fortunately, the state of Alabama has not been in the mix this last season. You see on the screen the World Renew logo and our motto. Living justice are the first two words. So I feel like I'm in good company with this audience today and appreciate the opportunity to join you. In the last 51 years, World Renew has provided the support of 44,000 volunteers responding to communities all over North America, both the United States and in Canada. And as a result of those volunteer service, 430,000 families have been assisted, nothing compared with the support legal services and their grantees have provided to individuals throughout the country. But it's something. And as partners, we're able to accomplish so much more. I'm not an attorney, but I've seen firsthand the vital work of legal services organizations in support of disaster response and recovery efforts, assisting survivors. My first major role in disaster response dates back 47 years to the University of Evansville plane crash that I responded to as a representative from the American Red Cross. I wish I knew then what I know now about the vital work of legal services in providing support to, giving voice to individuals at a time when they needed desperately the support of that voice so they could find it in themselves to advocate for themselves. My former organization, the Be Ready Alliance Coordinating for Emergencies, served as the umbrella organization for the Escambia Long-Term Recovery Committee that supported individuals in innumerable different disasters over a period of time. I learned from that experience the importance of engaging with faith-based organizations early in my career. World Renew was one of the organizations that responded to my community after Hurricane Ivan, which I'll talk about later, after a 2014 flood, after tornadoes in 2016, and after Hurricane Sally in 2020. It may not seem obvious to outsiders the important partnership that our community has with our legal services partners in our community. What I've learned over a period of time is the importance of collaboration, not only with legal services, but also with those with whom you partner. In the initial aftermath of a disaster, people, when impacted, oftentimes turn to their churches and faith-based organizations in their community seeking help and assistance. And when we're partnering with others, we're in a position to provide that assistance. When people come to us, we provide them an opportunity to hear their story, to share their needs, to identify ways that we, in collaboration with other partners, can meet their needs. whether it's food assistance or basic needs or securing housing in circumstances such as you've heard about just now, about individuals displaced from their dwelling. The assistance of legal services in addressing the issues associated with illegal evictions and with FEMA appeals, and the innumerable different issues that you face day in, day out, but exacerbated at the time of disaster, become very important to those of us who are providing support to those survivors. My partnership with legal services dates back more than 20 years to Hurricane Ivan in 2004. In my community, which is about 300,000 individuals, the 6,000 homes destroyed and the 12,000 that experienced major damage to their dwelling was very significant. 115,000 families in that community were impacted with damages to their home. 4,000 businesses closed for the last time as a result of Hurricane Ivan. And within weeks, over 5,000 families ended up placed in FEMA temporary housing until their homes could be repaired or restored. At that time, I served as the CEO for the American Red Cross of Northwest Florida, and my other role was to volunteer my time as the chair of the case management organization in my community. What I saw from that were many individuals that turned to case management because they had nowhere else to turn. And we found ourselves very quickly turning to our partners that we had come to know through the support of Leslie Powell Boudreau, who entered into the conversation with us to help us address issues like air property titles that had been passed down from one generation to the next, that was in fact the very obstacle to those survivors being able to secure assistance from those organizations otherwise there to help. Thanks to the engagement of legal services, we were able to address those issues related to title issues. We were able to support survivors as they were returned to their homes after hope was restored once they connected with legal services representatives and case managers. We found ourselves with a unique opportunity at the end of the Stafford Act limitation of temporary housing, where we found ourselves facing survivors still in temporary housing at that Stafford Act limitation. Through partnership with Legal Services of North Florida, we were able to define a path to accepting what became 214 mobile homes and trailers through the FEMA donations program and through the modified group sale process to continue housing those survivors for an additional 12 months. At the end of that 12 months, we were able to say that we had fulfilled the mission and had accomplished our intended purpose of returning those families to a repaired home. But for many renters in our community, we found that their road to recovery was continued. So thanks to the support of legal services, we were able to partner with them to work through issues, thanks to their connection with our clients, the long road to recovery by being able to donate 90 of those mobile homes to individuals that were pre-disaster renters. We did so in concert with the work of our case management partners and with the resources made available to us through your partners that were able to help these clients navigate what was unfamiliar territory to them, developing a plan to maintain a home, developing a strategy to being able to afford flood insurance in the future, to do all the things necessary to own and operate their own household. I've continued to work with legal services organizations now through many decades working here in Florida. John Lawless is certainly an important partner and has taken on an extraordinary role as the chair of the long-term recovery group that is supporting survivors in their recovery here in Hillsborough County and in neighboring Pinellas County. Jason serves not only as the secretary for that LTRG, but also serves as a member of the board of the Florida VOAD. These two gentlemen have also supported Inform Florida, the overarching organization that connects 211, 311, 511, 988 organizations, all the information and referral services, and have provided training to them so that they can recognize a legal issue and provide appropriate referrals when necessary. Kathy Grunwald has done an extraordinary job, and thanks to the support of grants from Legal Services Corporation, has provided 770 individuals with training in concert with long-term recovery groups and VOAD organizations and community organizations addressing disaster issues by providing 49 different training opportunities to connect those individuals so that they can work together in overcoming the challenges faced by disaster survivors. As a faith leader, I've come to appreciate the power of partnership. I know of no more important partnership that exists than those of you supporting the work of long-term recovery groups and others supporting assistance to survivors. Together, we can accomplish what none of us could accomplish alone. On behalf of World Renew and the National VOAD Long-Term Recovery Group, I say thank you for your service and support.
Greg, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing both your experiences and your expertise. We really appreciate it. Next, I'd like to invite Peter Dennis to join us on stage. Peter is the Regional Managing Attorney for Florida Rural Legal Services based in the Fort Myers office. He's going to share with us his insights on the community benefits that come from investing in the provision of disaster legal services. Peter.
Thank you. And I'm going to try to be quick here to keep us on time, so I may talk a little fast, but I think you'll all be able to keep up. I wanted to take a few moments to speak a little bit about what I consider to be one of the most important things about long-term funding in disaster aid. My name is Peter Dennis. I'm with Florida Rural Legal Services. I am a managing attorney out of the Fort Myers office, and many of you may remember in 2022, we were hit with Hurricane Ian. And overnight, many of our lives were changed, and many of the lives of the people we serve were changed. At that time, I wouldn't say that we had an immense amount of experience in disaster services, but we recognized we had to hurry up and learn quick because the need was there. We were definitely helped and benefited greatly from an LSC long-term disaster grant, which we are still currently working under. And I want to talk quickly about 5 benefits that we have specifically seen as a result of that grant. The first of which is our ability to look at our outreach and to understand our populations in a more unique way. As you look at the area we serve both a coastal area and we serve an inland area. In the coastal area, we have a lot of urban places. We have a lot of infrastructure. And when we looked at doing outreach after the disaster in those areas, we found that we were able to go to places like DRCs, the Disaster Resource Centers, to FEMA, where FEMA is, and to places where the SBA where they were handing out disaster relief. We were able to find the survivors in those areas and sort of target our outreach there. But what we found is that in our more rural areas, we weren't seeing the same amount of individuals in proportion of the population. We didn't know how we were going to be able to reach out to those people. So we realized we had to get creative. And it wasn't me, but if I could remember who it was, I would probably still say it wasn't me. But in one of our meetings, somebody said, I have an idea. Why don't we start doing our outreach at laundromats? After a disaster, everybody has dirty clothes, and a lot of people don't have electricity for an extended period of time. And also, laundromats service a lot of the people who are traditionally our clients, people who don't have private washers and dryers. And there's one thing that everybody at a laundromat has, besides quarters, that is time. Everybody is waiting to switch their load over to the dryer or take their clothes out the dryer and start folding them. So we had a captive audience. We set up the tables, and people who were reluctant to come to us, who thought, well, you know, I have these problems with my roof disappearing, or I have damage to my house, but what am I going to do, call a lawyer? They didn't see the value necessarily in doing that. But suddenly they had nothing to lose but to come up and talk to us. And the more we talked to them, and the more they talked to us, the more we realized that we had things we could help them with. And the more that they saw that, wow, this is a resource that we can use. That creativity and outreach has continued far past the initial disaster. That creativity and outreach is something we now recognize has to go on 24/7, 364 days of the year. We have to continue to be flexible in how we reach out to our communities, because our communities are not necessarily going to be knocking at our door, but they are going to be in need of our services. The second one is leveraging our relationship with fellow LSC grantees. And this one is very close to me. Part of what we were able to do as a recipient of this 2022 grant was we were able to develop a mentor-mentee relationship with Legal Services of North Florida. Now, they have a great amount of experience in providing disaster services, so we were very honored to be able to partner with them on this. The investment in which LSC provided in developing their disaster services and their disaster recovery is paid forward through the ability for us to be able to go to them and for them to teach us. Now, we had formal meetings once a month, and we still do, but also, as importantly, we have informal discussions. I know that anytime I have a question that's disaster law related, I can pick up the phone and call Kathy. And not only will I probably end up feeling a little better about myself, because she just has a way of talking, which you'll see, that'll put you at ease. She has an encyclopedic knowledge of all things disaster. And what more, she knows exactly, if she doesn't know what it is that she can answer, she knows where I can find it and who I can talk to. And most importantly, she probably has their home phone number. It's amazing to be able to leverage that LSC network, that network of grantees that we're able to call not only our colleagues, but people who share the same passion that we do, especially in times of need. The third thing I'll talk about is enhancing our community partnerships. That is extremely important, not only in times of disaster, but in our normal blue skies. After a disaster occurs, everybody's running around. They're trying to figure out who they can talk to, what they can do. Everybody's bumping heads. And a lot of times we lose the ability to help people because we're replicating services. So with a long-term disaster recovery grant, we're able to take the time and space to get to know the resources within our community and the partners within our community that we need to know so that when these things do occur, they know who we are and what we do, and we know who they are and how to get in touch with them. And that enhances our ability to respond. You can't do that if you don't have somebody who is supporting you long term. If you're just looking at case numbers and you're just looking at going in and doing something for 6 months, you're not going to have the time to build these partnerships. And that is one of the fantastic things that a long-term recovery grant from LSC has allowed us to do. Fourth, I'm very proud to say that it has enhanced our community preparedness. A prepared community is a resilient community. So one example of this that I'm very proud of has been a collaboration with the Red Cross in our area. And using our LSC funding, we were able to come up with the idea of disaster go bags, which are essentially waterproof satchels. And in these that we give out after training are checklists and information. Most importantly, they say, these are the things that you need to have in this after a disaster to help you. You need to have your insurance policy, put a copy of that in there, a copy of your driver's license, put a copy of all these things that are going to be required of you when you go and you talk to your insurance company, when you go and you talk to FEMA, when you go and you talk to whoever it is. And we include pens and notebooks in there, because the one thing that I learned after going through a disaster was there are thousands of numbers and claim numbers and file numbers and your number 486.27. So make sure you bring up that reference number when you call back. Those are things that you don't have on you when you come from the shelters. A lot of the population that we serve are older individuals who may not have the time or wherewithal to gather these documents in times of great stress. So having that together beforehand and being able to say, I have this, I can evacuate when I need to, and I know I have what I need to have with me. That helps our community respond to a disaster. And again, would not be possible without the long-term commitment that LSC has given us through this long-term grant. Fifth, and finally, has been the long-term community commitment. A community knows when you are there for the first 6 months and you leave. A community knows when you're there for the news cycle. But what we've been able to do with the long-term grant is show the community we're not just going to be there for the immediate needs that you have after a disaster. We are there for the long term, because the issues that you face right after a disaster are going to be different than the issues that you face in the long term. Right after a disaster, you may be looking at things like landlord-tenant issues or the condemnation of where you live. But in the long term, 2 years out, which is where we are right now, you suddenly realize that that contractor that you hired to redo your house, he's not coming back and your house is gutted. And you didn't realize that was going to happen at first, that the insurance money that you took is all gone, but your house is only 2/3 repaired. These are things that only become apparent to you in the long term. And that's why it's so important that we hang in there with long-term recovery groups, that we hang in there with groups that talk about unmet needs. And building that trust with the community not only helps with our post-disaster response, it helps with our general status within the community. They know that they can trust us. They know that they can come to us with their legal needs. They know that we are going to be there. And we know who they are too. And knowing your client is just as important as them knowing you. So this investment that LSC makes in long-term recovery, it builds dividends. It builds upon itself. It provides us with the opportunity to provide assistance to people, not only directly after a disaster, which is the immediate goal, but to provide more broader legal assistance in the community long after the disaster has passed. I know that what's important to my team and my colleagues is probably the same thing that's important to the people sitting here and all of you, and that is the network of LSC grantees. The ability to look out and to say, I have this problem and I have a network of people who are just as passionate as I am, who are going to be there and who are going to help me with it. I don't know of a single law firm that has a presence in every county, in every state in this country, but I know LSC does. And that is powerful. That connection is powerful. So when things happened with Helene and Milton, and we saw what was happening in the Carolinas, we were able to reach out to them and say, what can we do? Now, they may not have needed our help, but they knew we were there for them. Just like I know the people in Southern California right now are being helped by LSC grantees in that area. So the help that we do as grantees, the help we're able to provide our fellow grantees, builds upon itself. Every investment you make in an LSC grantee will build upon itself and will touch another LSC grantee at some point. This is a network that I am very definitely proud to be a part of. I can say, speaking for myself, but I'm sure, again, the sentiment is shared, that working in legal aid is not just a job, it is a mission. It's something that you're called to do. And I know that all of the people here in front of me and all of you who are here supporting the mission of LSC are also called to that mission. I can say that working in that mission with an LSC grantee has been one of the greatest privileges that I've had in the 20 years since I received my law degree. And for that, I thank LSC. I thank them not only for providing me with that opportunity, but providing my community with the opportunity to receive the assistance that they need, for providing our communities across the country with the opportunity to not only have their own LSCs receive this knowledge, but to share that knowledge with their fellow LSC grantees all over the country. So, LSC, happy 50th. And I thank you for the forward-thinking investment that you are making in our access to justice.
Thank you so much, Peter. Next, I'm thrilled to bring up a name you've heard a few times today, Kathy Grunwald. Kathy serves as the Disaster Coordinator Attorney for Legal Services of North Florida in their Tallahassee office. And she's here today to share her perspective on the thread that connects legal services to the broader disaster response and recovery network. Kathy.
Well, finally. Thank you, Christina. A slide. On the screen is my home after Hurricane Michael. My husband and I evacuated, and we had to stay away for 9 days after the storm. It seemed like 9 weeks. And this is what we returned to. I looked at that mess and I thought, how are we ever going to get this cleaned up? It really seemed overwhelming. And even though I recognize that my circumstances are different from a lot of other survivors, I shared the same feeling of sadness at the destruction, the loss of personal property, and the feeling of being overwhelmed by the mess, the debris, and the work that had to be done to get back to normal. For many of us who live and work in disaster areas, it is those shared feelings and experiences with survivors that guides our work and keeps us focused on survivor recovery. As Christina said, I'm Kathy Grunwald, the Senior Disaster Coordination Attorney at Legal Services of North Florida, where I run our disaster practice group and our statewide disaster umbrella group. It was right after Hurricane Michael that I took this disaster position. The disaster grant that I work on has the goal of bridging the knowledge gap between legal and non-legal responders to reduce the time it takes to recover and to improve the overall recovery for survivors. The grant acknowledged that most emergency management and other nonprofit response organizations were not aware of the particular legal issues and legal problems that disaster survivors encounter. We all know that disasters cannot be prevented entirely, and for some types of disasters, we don't have time to prepare. So what we need is a program that will effectively and quickly meet the needs of all of those who are impacted. A program where recovery does not further distress disaster survivors, but instead gives them the information, resources, encouragement, and representation needed to move forward with their lives. So that was my goal, and I'm like, what to do? Where do I start? You can read the FEMA Individual Assistance Program and Policy Guide. You can look online, the websites, the fact sheets, try to figure out that sequence of delivery chart. And we did all of that. But we knew, like so many of the others today, that we had to get out of our office, that we had to get out and meet our community partners, to talk with our partners and to work with them. And that's what we did. We went to a bunch of partner meetings. We gave multiple presentations on civil legal aid and disaster legal issues, how legal aid can assist survivors in their recovery, and the most important thing is we've maintained those connections. And we do that by not waiting for people to call us and ask us to do something, to make a presentation, but calling them and saying, we'd like to talk to you about civil legal aid and disaster legal issues. We'd like to speak at your conferences and talk about disaster legal issues. We held a regional conference. We've held 2 statewide disaster conferences that's open to our legal and non-legal partners, and that's thanks to our LSC grant. And then we reached out to the state of Florida, government departments and agencies, particularly the Florida Department of Emergency Management and Volunteer Florida. I remember calling and emailing the Pam Hughes, who is the Human Services Program Manager at the Florida Department of Emergency Management. And I believe Greg had given me her name. And so I wrote her and I said, I'd like to come talk to you about disaster legal issues. And she said, okay. So I showed up at the State Emergency Operations Center, and there were 10 other people there waiting for that presentation. So I thought to myself, okay, these people are interested. Maybe they get it. And so that meeting resulted in us for a tour of the State Emergency Operations Center, which was interesting. But more importantly, it established connections to people in state government, our individual assistance officer, the state housing officer, and many others. And eventually, at a seat at the table at the state of Florida daily mass care calls that are held in advance of an upcoming disaster and for weeks after that. On those daily calls, we report out on what we, legal services, is seeing in the field. What are our clients calling about? And that's to a whole group of people all through the state. But it's also on these calls that we learn about the resources that are available to help our clients with their immediate needs. Places to go for food, for water, for baby supplies. Where can I get a shower? Where can I laundry my clothes? Who's picking up the debris? Is that tarp for free? All of those things, you just don't know that until you've experienced it and gone through with it. Who's out there with the chainsaw cutting down your tree? Who's picking up your tree? Where's the Family Assistance Center? Those are all the things that we hear on that daily mass care call. And I don't just keep that information to myself. I take that back. I send that out to our disaster umbrella group so that they can help the folks, the survivors in their community. And the same goes for the legal information that we share. They don't keep it to themselves. Our partners gain insight into typical legal issues and civil legal aid. Now, these recovery workers may be able to recognize a legal issue and know where to refer folks for legal assistance. Does it make a difference? I'm absolutely sure that it does, and certain that it does. And here's how I know. I have many, many examples of people calling our office, our partners, where they have seen somebody out in the field who they believe has a legal issue. And where can they go? Who should they call? What's the legal services program in that area? And we're fortunate to be able to give them that information. We're fortunate now to have the disaster legal helpline that Jason and John work on. I'm smiling because I didn't say Jason for John and John for Jason.
Move on, Kathy. We'll talk about it later.
So we get, in fact, this morning I got a question from one of our partners about somebody who was having a legal issue. Of course, it was a housing issue. But that disaster legal helpline is a wonderful thing for us to have in Florida, and for the fact that it's also the hotline during an emergency and immediately after is made it so much easier for survivors, so much quicker. There's not a whole bunch of phone calls. It goes there and they know immediately where to send the call, and people get immediate assistance. And finally, in Florida, we've seen a lot. We had this year alone hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, and freezing winter weather. But working together with our legal and our non-legal partners, we can ease the recovery of our clients and survivors. So I want to say thank you for asking me to be a part of this, and thank you for your support of disaster legal assistance.
Thank you, Kathy, for highlighting that important aspect of legal aid's role and work. Lastly, although she couldn't join us in person, we want you to hear from Colleen about what happened to her after Hurricane Ian's devastating damage to her home. Working with legal aid advocates from Rural Legal Services changed her life.
I was hurt because I don't have a huge amount of money, and I lost my husband a year and a half ago, and it's just been difficult. I think that for not just seniors, and I'm a widow also, we don't know always what to do or how to go about it to get the help we need. And there's a lot of companies out there that take advantage of us. I signed a contract with Stanislaus Roofing company, and I gave them half the price down. The amount I gave them was $10,300, and after even 10 months, they had not even filed for a permit, which they're supposed to do within 1 month after they receive my money. And I told the gentleman that I needed to have it done by September 28th because in our village, we need to have our repairs done within a year after the hurricane. He said it will be done by the end of August. Well, it was not done by the end of August. It was not done by September 28th. Finally got them on the phone in October, and they said it will be done by December 12th. Well, December 12th came, and I finally got a hold of them, and they said that now it's going to be the middle of January. And I said, that's unacceptable. I'd like a refund. He says, well, I'll get back to you by the end of the day. He didn't. So I called the Better Business Bureau to try to see if they would help me. And they tried for a month, and they would not even answer the phone for them. At that time, I called the Florida Rural Legal Services, and they put me in contact with Kimberly Rushton, and she has been wonderful. She has helped me in so many ways. She has contacted them. She's told them that I want a refund. They finally said that they would write me a check, but they are going to take $2,000 and for their expenses, which I'm not sure what they were. There's a fraud department at the sheriff's department that do not like the idea of companies taking money from people and not doing the service. So I called the Lee County Sheriff's Department Fraud Division. They came to my house, and Officer Tripp called Stanislaus, and well, about a week later, I did receive the check. And then just to make sure that everything was on the up and up and that I would not be charged more later, Kim had them sign a release form for that nature. And I couldn't have asked for a better person to represent me. Without this service, I'm not sure I would have gotten anything back. Don't give up. Don't give up. There are people out there and organizations that will help you.